My House of Horrors Chapter 591-600. After obtaining the black phone, Chen Ge had mastered many skills that had nothing to do with haunted houses, like tracking and anti-surveillance. He held the fishing rod in his hand and followed the fisherman while maintaining a distance from him. The fisher was scared out of his wits. He jogged all the way, but he did not notice Chen Ge. Not far from the reservoir, there were a few low-rise houses that looked very shabby. The fisher stopped next to one of the houses. He took out the key, and seeing that there was no one around, he slid into the house. He sure is fast. Chen Ge waited until the man entered the house. He leaned against the door and looked in. The house was much bigger than he expected, and it came with its own courtyard. Should I knock and enter under the guise of returning the fishing rod, or should I climb over it? When Chen Ge was thinking, a commotion came from inside the house. His pupils narrowed, and he continued to look through the gap. The fisher was kneeling before his fridge. His hands were pressed to the ground, and his lips kept screaming like he was begging for someone's forgiveness. What kind of trauma did he suffer at the dam? Why is he crying at the fridge? Is there a victim hiding inside the fridge? Quote. What happened next indirectly proved Chen Ge's suspicion. The fisher kowtowed at the fridge. His face was covered in dust and tears. This continued for about 10 minutes before the fisher calmed down. He used his sleeve to wipe his face and went to find a shovel from inside the house. What is he doing? Chen Ge could see everything clearly from outside the door. The fisher did not even have time to rest. Gasping for air, he dug a large hole in the yard. Digging hole. Hiding body parts. Quote. Once again, Chen Ge was right. The fisher opened the fridge door and took out several large black bags from inside. His arms were shaking. He kowtowed several more times at the bags before tossing them into the hole. I'm not fishing anymore. I'll burn paper money for you every year, no matter how much you want. Mumbling the strange words, the man picked up the shovel and prepared to fill the hole. Chen Ge felt like he could not wait any longer. Otherwise, he would have to personally dig the hole that the man had filled. Is anyone there? Chen Ge knocked on the door of the house. His sudden shout scared the fisher so much that he fell into the hole that he had dug. Cold sweat broke out on his face. I am the one who was fishing with you at the dam earlier. You forgot to take your fishing rod, so the manager asked me to bring it to you. Chen Ge stared at the man through the gap in the door. Brother, how is your recovery? Do you need me to call 120 for you? Quote. Hearing that Chen Ge wanted to call 120, the man could no longer sit still. He staggered to his feet and said, No need, no need. You can just leave your fishing rod at the door. I'll go get it myself. Brother, your voice doesn't sound right. Is there something wrong with you? Quote. I'm fine. Put down the fishing rod and leave. The fisher was sweating profusely. As he yelled, he pushed the soil around him into the hole. I can't leave. You're not in a good condition. Open the door and let me take a look. If you're really fine, I'll leave immediately. Chen Ge refused to leave. The fisher felt like cursing. Why did I run into someone like this? He hurriedly used the soil to cover the black bag and then opened the door a sliver while panting. I'm fine. Give me the fishing rod. But you don't look well. Give me the fishing rod. Give it to me. The fisher was almost driven mad. He roared. Perhaps he was too agitated, but when his body swayed, the bobber in his pocket fell out. The special luminous bobber fell to the ground. Chen Ge did not tighten it earlier, and the little finger fell out. The fisher reacted faster than Chen Ge, and he used his body to block Chen Ge's sight. What is that? You saw it. It's just a ham sausage. That's my exclusive bait. The fisher replaced the bobber, and he suddenly calmed down. His earlier irritation disappeared, and he even smiled at Chen Ge. However, this forced smile, combined with his dead fish eyes, made Chen Ge feel very uncomfortable. My fishing rod is also specially made, and it's very expensive. Thank you for bringing it back to me. Why don't you come in? The man was adjusting his breathing, and his tone sounded strange. Okay. Chen Ge looked like an honest man. He silently pressed the play button on the recorder in his backpack and entered the house. The hole in the yard had not been filled, and there was yellow soil everywhere. I plan to plant some vegetables here, and I've just dug up the ground. The man suddenly became friendly. Come in and have a seat. I caught a few river fish this morning. I'll let you taste my cooking later. Chen Ge walked ahead without any warning. When he entered the house, the man behind him silently locked the door and then raised the shovel in his hand. The smile on his face disappeared, and the fisher's eyes were filled with venom and hatred. He stared at the back of Chen Ge's head, looking for a chance to ambush Chen Ge from behind. However, before he found the chance, the man before him suddenly removed the backpack, and then without any warning, without any reason, he slammed the backpack at the fisher's face. This was too sudden, it was completely different from what he had planned. The backpack hit his nose, and the man's vision was blocked. Before he recovered, pain came from his stomach like he had been kicked. His body slammed into the door, and the shovel fell to the side. Before he knew what had happened, pain came from all over his body. The thought that someone was beating him up flashed through his mind. He felt that it was inexplicable and even a little wrong. Stop. Stop hitting me. F***ck. He used his hands to protect his head. The shovel had already fallen somewhere. He writhed on the ground, but the man did not seem like he was going to stop. After being beaten for several minutes, it was not until the man felt tired that the pain on his body lessened. With a swollen face and a bloody nose, the fisher collapsed in the corner of the living room. He looked at Chen Ge with fear. Are you crazy? Why are you beating me up? Quote. Because you want to kill me. Chen Ge picked up the shovel from the ground and sat down on the sofa. Which eye of yours saw that I want to kill you? I saw that intention in your eyes. Chen Ge was too lazy to waste time with the fisher. Next, I will ask you a few questions. Answer them honestly. You followed me here just to ask me a few questions. First, what did you see in the dam earlier? Chen Ge cut to the chase. He did not want to waste time. The man hesitated before saying, there was no kingfish in the water. I saw a human. A human. Yes, with limbs and hair. The fear in the man's eyes was overflowing. There was more than one. When I tossed the bait into the water, there were many similar things rising to the surface. There were many of them. Chen Ge nodded. Second question, I already know what your bait is. Tell me, why did you choose to use it as bait, and how did you know they like this kind of bait? I don't know what you're talking about. The fisher was still trying to deny it. It's fine if you don't want to answer that question. The police will ask more questions than I will. Third question, have you been to Liwan City? Have you taken the last bus on Route 104? Shengshang was related to the ghost fetus, and the water ghosts at Eastern Zhujiang's dam were monsters born from Shengshang. Chen Ge wanted to confirm whether the fisher was fishing for water ghosts out of personal preference or for something else. Liwan City. The man was confused. It did not look like he was faking it, so he probably had nothing to do with the culprit in Eastern Zhujiang. After asking a few more questions, Chen Ge called the police. You can tell the police the rest. 20 minutes later, Eastern Zhujiang's police arrived. Why don't you come with us? There's no need for that. I suggest you learn from Western Zhujiang's police station. Keep things simple, and we'll have many chances to meet in the future. After a simple statement, Chen Ge found out about the fisher's crime from the police. The dead body in his yard came from Mingyang residence. The man had a twisted personality. Some time ago, on his way home, he had gotten into a conflict with a homeless man. He had accidentally injured the man, and the homeless man had threatened to take revenge. After many conflicts, the fisher had followed the homeless man to confirm the man's residence. Then, he had come to the abandoned Mingyang residence to kill the man. When he was dumping the body that night, the man had discovered a 1-meter-long shadow in the dam. That was the first time he knew about the kingfish at Eastern Zhujiang's dam. After leaving the fisher's home, Chen Ge had found out what he wanted to know. He hailed a cab and returned to New Century Park. The mission related to the girl on the black phone still hasn't been triggered, but I can confirm that she is related to the water ghost. Her big sister is probably one of the kingfish at the dam. This 2-star mission was harder than Chen Ge had expected. The water ghost was hiding inside the dam, and if he was not careful, he could be dragged into it. It was different from being on land. I wonder if Shu Yin's power will be affected underwater. Chen Ge carried his backpack and walked to the park's water project. He pressed the play button on the recorder. There was a faded scent of blood in the night wind. Shu Yin, in a red shirt, appeared next to Chen Ge. Still haven't found your heart. Chen Ge could see the sadness on Shu Yin's face. Sometimes, he had no idea what Shu Yin was after. All he could do was hope that Shu Yin could be happier. After driving Shu Yin into the pool, Chen Ge realized that the connection between him and Shu Yin had weakened. It felt like the latter's senses were affected as well. This is just a pool, and it's already this bad. If I jump into the dam, it'll be even more troublesome. Shu Yin, stay by my side and don't wander off. I need a ghost that can dive underwater. Entering the haunted house, Chen Ge took out the comic and thought about the ghosts that he could use. Yan Danian, the foul odor boy, by Cholan. After eliminating the ghosts one by one, Chen Ge was suddenly reminded of a ghost that had no presence at all. He rushed into the coffin village scenario and pushed open the door of one of the old houses. There were 2 locust trees inside the house, and there was a large water tank next to one of them. My haunted house also has a ghost that lives in the water. Chen Ge walked toward the water tank, and he saw a ball-shaped object floating above the tank. When Chen Ge got close, the ball-shaped object slowly sank into the tank, leaving a trail of bubbles on the surface. This ghost was brought out by Chen Ge from Coffin Village. It was called the Vat Ghost. It had been hiding inside the water tank and had brought many surprises to the visitors. The haunted house has been kind to you. Today, it's time for you to contribute to the haunted house. Chen Ge and Shu Yin stood on either side of the tank. They looked at the ghost that hugged its knees and kept blowing bubbles at the bottom of the tank. They shook their heads. You're going to face a dangerous water ghost. You can't be so cowardly. Chen Ge had Shu Yin fish the Vat Ghost out from the water. He summoned the other ghosts and had them give the Vat Ghost an emergency training. I don't need you to fight 100 ghosts, but at least you have to run fast. After you finish your investigation, bring me the information. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The training for the Vat Ghost was mainly focused on dodging, movement, and instantaneous explosive power. Chen Ge did not need the Vat Ghost to be very aggressive, he only hoped that it could return alive after getting the information. I'll leave it to you. Chen Ge closed the door that led to the underground scenario and returned to the staff break room. He turned on his phone and realized that he had several unread messages. Most of them were from Wen Wen's aunt, but there were a few from Shu Wan. They were mostly asking about Chen Ge's whereabouts. When Wen Wen's aunt came to pick up her brother and Wen Wen from work, she realized that the father and daughter had already been sent away by Chen Ge, and she could not help but worry. The girl did not call me after that, which means that she has already confirmed the father and daughter's safety. After giving it some thought, Chen Ge felt like it was better to send a message back to the girl. Perhaps because it was too late, the girl did not reply to Chen Ge's message. Nothing should have happened, right? Chen Ge shook his head, thinking that he had been too sensitive recently. If something could happen to someone that he had only chatted with, then the world would be in chaos. Placing his phone on the bedside table, Chen Ge took out the black phone to look at the daily missions. Renovation, advertisement, expansion, normal difficulty missions don't mean much to me, but if it's a nightmare mission, I can consider it. Lying in bed, Chen Ge placed the white cat and Xiao Xiao next to him. He covered them with a thin blanket and planned to sleep early that night. When I wake up tomorrow, hopefully the Vat Ghost will give me a surprise. Chen Ge did not plan to drag it out any longer. Tomorrow night, he planned to complete the Twin Water Ghost mission. Even the foreign horror game designers wouldn't dare to create an underwater scenario like this. This should be my own creation. Hugging the fluffy white cat, Chen Ge slowly drifted into sleep. At 5 a.m., before the sun even rose, Chen Ge woke up. His limbs were cold, but he did not feel any discomfort. My body temperature is still dropping, but it's not that obvious. The amount of sleep was very short, but Chen Ge was very energetic. The later at night, the more awake I become, and my dependence on sleep is decreasing. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Chen Ge was no longer alone. If he collapsed, then all the ghosts at Haunted House would lose their home. I cannot abandon those ghosts, and they will not be able to leave me. That's it for now. Hopefully, the tragedy that befell the old lady from Coffin Village will not repeat itself here. After putting on his jacket, Chen Ge returned to the underground scenario. When he entered Coffin Village, he was shocked by what he saw. The vat ghost moved with an agility that did not match his body at all. He escaped from Xu Yin and Bai Chulin's pursuit. He was always able to dodge the attacks of the two ghosts at an impossible angle. This guy seems to be living in the water for a long time. His movements are more agile than we imagined. He's like a slippery eel. Lao Zhou and Duan Yu stood to the side, watching and commenting. Further away, there was a group of mannequin students watching. What a terrible comparison, but looks like the training is very successful. This vat ghost has potential. Chen Ge summoned back Xu Yin and Bai Cholan. He led the vat ghost out of the haunted house and placed him in the park's water entertainment facility. Once his body touched the water, the vat ghost's speed increased again. He moved very fast, but the expression on his face was the same as before. It was as if he missed the days when he could hide at the bottom of the vat alone and blow bubbles. After this trial mission is completed, you won't need to hide in the vat anymore. I'll get you a bigger pool. Chen Ge was satisfied with the change in the vat ghost. He was worried that the sun might hurt the vat ghost, so he gave it a quick look before returning it to the comic. Another trump card. At 8:20 a.m., Director Luo and Shu Shu arrived at the park early. There were two men in suits following behind them. Xiao Chen, let me introduce you. This is my former business partner and my former university classmate. He's CEO Bai from Gobi Group. We will be working with his company to upgrade our park's facilities. Director Luo's voice was bright and clear, but Chen Ge noticed that when he introduced the man, his eyes were very calm. There was not a trace of happiness. If anything, there was worry. Old classmate, this is the manager of our haunted house, Chen Ge. Director Luo introduced Chen Ge to CEO Bai. He's Chen Ge. CEO Bai scanned Chen Ge from head to toe and nodded kindly. To be able to support such a large haunted house alone and come up with all those scary scenarios, impressive. He extended his hand toward Chen Ge. If there's a chance, we can work together. Chen Ge looked at the man's face and thought it was familiar. He thought about it for a long time before he remembered that he had seen a picture on the futuristic theme park's engineer's phone. It was a picture of a gathering, and this CEO Bai was in it. Why would someone who was working with the futuristic theme park suddenly come to work with New Century Park? With confusion, Chen Ge silently turned to look at Director Luo. The man understood. He pressed his palm down and then pointed at himself, telling Chen Ge that he knew about this and that he could leave the rest to him. Director Luo was a successful businessman. It was better to leave the business between businessmen to a businessman. Chen Ge did not say anything else. He had a feeling that Director Luo had his own plan. He wanted to take all the benefits from the man but at the same time, prevent the man from succeeding. I hope everything goes well. After watching them leave, Chen Ge felt a sense of urgency from Director Luo. If not for the pressure from the futuristic theme park, he probably would not have taken such a risk. Looks like I need to speed up my own progress. I'll finish the other missions in Eastern Zhejiang first. If there's any resistance, I'll feed them to Zhongya and Bai Cholan. After 2 days of relaxation, Chen Ge felt like he could not continue like this. The theme park opened at 9 a.m., and a new day officially began. In the corridor of a certain residential area in Eastern Zhejiang, Wen held the door with both hands and cried loudly. Her large eyes were filled with tears, and it was heart-wrenching. I've already promised you to go to the theme park. Now, you need to fulfill your promise and go to school. A woman in business attire squatted beside Wen. She wanted to carry her down, but Wen refused to let go of the door. Even though Wen's father suffered from a disease and was less intelligent than a normal person, for a father, loving his daughter was like a biological instinct. He was shaken, and he wanted to stop Wen's aunt. Brother, I feel sorry for Wen as well, but if you don't want her to end up like you'd better let her go to school. The woman's words were harsh, and they touched the man's sore spot. The last thing the father wanted was for his daughter to end up like him. He stopped moving, but he did not go to save the girl. I'm doing this for your own good. I'll grow old one day. If Wen can't live on her own, what will happen to you two when I'm old? Wen's aunt picked up the girl, picked up the school bag from the ground, and forced her downstairs. When you get to school, listen to the teacher and don't argue with the other students. The woman got on the bus with Wen. The girl seemed to have given up on resisting. She hugged her school bag and lowered her head unhappily. Half an hour later, the woman sent Wen to a private rehabilitation school. There were many patients like Wen there, and there were some with ADHD and other natural diseases. Mr. Wen, I'll leave the child in your care. The woman still cared about Wen. Before she left, she reminded Wen a few times. She was worried, afraid that the girl would be bullied. Is it still the same as before? You'll come pick her up at night. It was a female teacher who spoke. She was plump, wore glasses, and had short hair. She looked to be around 40, and her voice was soft. Yes, thank you. The woman turned back several times with every step she took. In the end, she got on the bus and left. She still had work to do. Wen did not turn back to look at the woman, and she appeared very unhappy. Let's go in. The woman placed her hand on Wen's shoulder and pushed her forward lightly. Entering from the front door, they entered a special school. The school was not big, and it was divided into two areas, indoor and outdoor. At the moment, on the small field outside, a male teacher was leading a few children to do rehabilitation exercises. The exercises were not difficult, but the movements of the children were strange. However, the scene before them not only did not make them laugh, but it also made them feel sad. Wen seemed to hate this strange environment. She pushed the woman's hand away from her shoulder and took out a water bottle from her school bag. She did not drink the water. She opened the lid so that she could look at the water directly. Teacher Wen had seen Wen's strange behavior before, so she did not stop her and led Wen into the classroom. Rows of plastic tables and chairs were placed in the middle of the room. A female teacher who was also wearing glasses was lecturing the students. Xiao Zhu, arrange a seat for her. I still have something to do, so I need to go. Okay. The female teacher had seen Wen before. When she saw the girl, her brows frowned slightly, but she soon returned to normal. She arranged a seat at the back for the girl. Neither of them talked to the other, so out of sight, out of mind. Sitting in the last row, the girl leaned on the table. She did not take out the textbook from her bag. She only looked at the water inside the water bottle and mumbled to herself like she was talking to the water bottle. Her voice was very soft, and the classroom was quite chaotic. Initially, no one heard her until the female teacher pointed at the animal pictures on the projector and asked the students to come up and answer the questions. Then, the classroom slowly quieted down. Most of the students stopped talking, but Wen was still stuttering to communicate with the water bottle. When the female teacher heard her voice, she was quite angry. Lu Wen, can you tell us what kind of animal this is? The girl heard someone call her name. She lifted her head blankly, and when she realized everyone was looking at her, she felt quite uneasy. You don't know. Then what about this one? The female teacher changed the picture, and a frog appeared on it. Wen still did not say anything. She did not know what to do, and her palms were covered in sweat. I've told you many times, this is a frog. How come you can't remember that? The female teacher walked down from the podium. The more she looked at the girl, the angrier she became. You hug a bottle of water every day, but you never take a sip. When someone drinks your water, you scratch their face. I seriously doubt the doctor's diagnosis of you is wrong. The female teacher did not like Wen. She pointed at the picture on the projector. I'll tell you again, that is a frog. Can you remember it? The girl still did not say anything, and her eyes stared at the water bottle on the table. You're not going to say anything. The female teacher grabbed Wen's arm and had her stand in the aisle between the two rows of desks. Come on, do what it does in the picture. Wen still did not respond. In the end, with the teacher's constant signal, she seemed to understand what the other party was trying to say. Comparing it to the frog in the picture, she squatted on the ground, pressed her hands on the ground, and used her limbs to support her body. Remember this. This is a frog. I'll ask you again in the next class. The female teacher had Wen return to her seat, and the class continued. Patting away the dust on her hands, Wen stood up and leaned on the table again. Her eyes stared at the water bottle. No one had touched the bottle, but the water inside it started to move on its own, and a strand of black hair at the bottom of the glass floated upward. The morning class soon ended. After lunch, the rehabilitation school started to organize the students for an afternoon nap. Wen was arranged to sit in the corner. She did not cry or make a fuss. She hugged her water bottle and school bag and obediently walked to her bed. She dropped the school bag at her feet and placed the glass next to the pillow. About half an hour later, when the children started to fall asleep, the teacher who came to inspect the room entered the room. When she walked to Wen's side, she noticed that there was an open glass next to the child. Why is there a strand of hair inside? The female teacher picked up the glass and poured the water inside into the bathroom. Then, she placed the glass on the cupboard next to the bed. At 2 p.m., the children were woken up one after another. Once Wen opened her eyes, the first thing she did was look at the glass by the bedside, but she did not see anything. She looked around anxiously. In the end, she realized that the glass had been placed on the cupboard, but the water inside had been poured away. Wen dropped the glass on the ground. There was no hair inside, and Wen started to cry loudly. At that moment, the female teacher who was called Xiaozhu was talking to the male teacher. The two of them were very close to each other, and they were talking and laughing. They were chatting happily when they suddenly heard Wen's crying. The female teacher was getting impatient. It's her again. I suspect this girl doesn't suffer from congenital dementia but a mental illness after birth. Pushing open the door, the woman walked to the girl's side. She had no idea what was wrong with Wen, and she could not communicate with her at all. After she cleaned up the pieces of the quilt on the floor, she saw that Wen was still crying, so she dragged Wen out of the room and locked her up in another room. Don't disturb the other children. Calm down first. After you're done crying, I'll come and find you. Wen's crying came from inside the room. The teacher listened for a while from outside. She planned to wait for the girl's crying to subside before entering, but Wen's crying only grew louder. There's definitely something wrong with this child's head. She's the one who broke the cup, so what's wrong with her in the middle of the day? The teacher had to take care of the other children, so she decided to leave Wen alone inside the room to calm down. She left the room and returned to the dormitory. When all the children were dressed and ready for the afternoon class, the teacher returned to the room. Half an hour had passed, and Wen finally stopped crying. Looks like it's not a bad idea to leave her alone. I shouldn't spoil them too much. The teacher thought she had found a good way to teach Wen a lesson. She pushed open the door to the room. In the small room, there was a humid air, and it gave off an eerie feeling. There was a puddle of water on the floor, and the girl stood alone in the corner with her head lowered. Her slender arms dangled weakly, and her pale skin stood out. Her hair fell on her face, covering her eyes. She did not make any sound, like she was just a decoration in the room. She's not crying anymore. The female teacher sensed that something was wrong with the girl. She shivered for no reason. After entering the small room, she found it difficult to breathe. It was as if the room was filled with water, and if she stayed too long, she would drown. The sound of wind chimes came from outside the room, as well as the children singing. This was their normal school work, but standing in the single room and listening to those voices, the feeling was completely different. It was as if they were not singing children with mental disabilities or physical illnesses, but the moans of many souls in pain. Come here. The teacher did not dare to enter the room anymore. She reached out her hand toward the girl, hoping that the girl would walk out on her own. However, Wen did not seem to hear her at all. She maintained her strange posture. Her arms were slightly bent, and her body leaned forward. The lips that were not covered by her hair were pulled to the side. Can't you hear me? I told you to come here. The teacher looked at the child, and a strange emotion appeared in her heart. It appeared to be fear. I'm afraid of a child. It was broad daylight, and the sun was shining brightly. The teacher made up her mind and walked into the room. She grabbed the curtain and wanted to pull it open. However, just as she was about to pull it open, she felt a chill on her wrist like something had grabbed her. Ah! With a scream, the female teacher turned around and found that her wrist had been grabbed by Wen. The little girl's previous stupidity had changed, and her eyes had become much weirder. It was like a bottomless pond with many corpses floating in it. What was going on? The female teacher's hand that was holding onto the curtain slowly lost its strength. She could no longer pull the curtain open. Let's go to class. Wen said 6 words clearly. She did not stutter or tremble. Every word was very clear. This was completely different from her previous behavior. Okay. The female teacher didn't waste any more time and ran out of the room. When they reached the corridor, the oppressive feeling slowly dissipated. The female teacher did not dare to turn around to look at Wen. She felt like her wrist was being bitten by something. It was cold and numb, and she was slowly losing consciousness. After entering the classroom, Wen took the initiative to let go of her hand. Without waiting for her to say anything, Wen walked to the last row of the classroom. Today is so weird. Even though Wen had let go of her, the female teacher's wrist still felt cold. She asked the students to open all the curtains in the classroom, and then the class began. She tried her best not to look at where Wen was and slowly put the incident that happened in the afternoon to the back of her mind. At 3:30 p.m., Chen Ge's haunted house ran into a small problem. CEO Bai, who had been summoned by Director Luo, wanted to personally experience Chen Ge's haunted house. Chen Ge, who did not know the man's background, planned to give CEO Bai the best VIP service. In other words, he would only allow CEO Bai to enter the haunted house alone and then arrange for a few ghosts to act as visitors to accompany him. The actors were ghosts, and so were the visitors. Wherever one looked, there were real ghosts. This would definitely leave a valuable memory for CEO Bai, and he could use this opportunity to get some useful information. The plan was already set, but CEO Bai had changed his mind at the last minute and had his secretary, who had come with him, give it a try. A mere secretary was not worthy of Chen Ge's attention. He purposely lowered the difficulty of the 3-star scenario, and the secretary almost cleared the 3rd sick hall. The other party might think that Chen Ge's haunted house was not that impressive, but if they were careless, Chen Ge planned to do it himself the next time they came. He would release all the mental patients' souls and show them the Society of Strange Tales. CEO Bai and Director Luo's discussion went smoothly, but after sending CEO Bai away, there was no smile on Director Luo's face. Things had gone too smoothly, and Director Luo was feeling uneasy. Chen Ge did not know much about these things, and he could not interfere. Based on his trust in Director Luo, he did not ask any questions. The haunted house closed at night. After cleaning up, Chen Ge entered the underground scenario alone. That night, he planned to complete the Twin Water Ghost mission. Taking out the comic to collect all the ghosts, Chen Ge shoved the hammer into his backpack. After completing the Water Ghost mission, the number of employees at Haunted House will increase, and the first underwater scenario will be unlocked. I wonder how it will be presented. Filled with anticipation, Chen Ge left New Century Park. When he hailed a cab to head to the dam, his phone rang. It was Wen's aunt. Hello. Did Wen go to your place? Mr. Chen, have you seen Wen? The anxious voice of Wen's aunt came from the other end of the phone. Wen, why would she be at my place? Tell me slowly. A bad feeling rose in Chen Ge's heart. Wen is missing. When I went to the rehabilitation school to fetch her home, I realized that she was not at the school. The teachers at the school don't know where she is. The surveillance showed that she was waiting for me at the school gate after school, but after a while, she disappeared from the surveillance. Now, no one knows where she is. Wen's aunt was panicking. The girl likes your theme park a lot. She even told me that she felt very comfortable at your haunted house. She, who had been so gloomy before, finally smiled when she came back from your theme park, so I suspect the girl might come back to your theme park. I don't think so. You live in eastern Zhejiang, and we live in western Zhejiang. The distance is very far. I'm just reminding you. If you see the girl, remember to call me back, thank you. Okay. No problem, but I think there's a high chance that Wen is still at her school. Can you tell me the location of her school? After Wen's aunt gave him the location, Chen Ge hung up. He hurried to the guard and explained the situation to him, telling him to keep an eye on the girl. After that, Chen Ge hurried to the girl's school. From how he saw it, the girl could not have gone too far. She did not have any money on her, so she should still be around the school. The girl's sister is a water ghost. Could her sudden disappearance be related to her sister? Did I attract the attention of the water ghosts when I went to the dam yesterday? It was still early, so Chen Ge called a cab to get to the rehabilitation school. Such a troublesome person. If you're mentally challenged, you shouldn't have so many thoughts. The female teacher called Xiaozhu walked down the corridor. Next to her was the male teacher who was responsible for the outdoor classes. Don't say that. If outsiders hear this, it won't reflect well on our school. The male teacher was understanding. Even though he did not look happy, at least he did not voice his dissatisfaction. Ah Cheng, if something happened to this girl, we would be going shopping and then going to the movies. The female teacher did not hide her emotions before the male teacher. Shush, Headmaster Wen doesn't like it when the teachers are in a relationship. We should be careful here. He walked ahead. Let's find the girl first. It's good that she's gone. I've been sick of her for a long time, the woman said angrily. The two turned into another corridor. This corridor was not lit. The male teacher was about to turn on the light when something soft suddenly wrapped around his arm. He turned around with surprise and realized that his arm was being hugged by the female teacher. Why are you ignoring me? The woman made an expression that she thought was cute. Seeing that there was no one around, the man secretly pecked the woman on the cheek. Let's get back to business first. If the girl really goes missing, it will have a negative impact on our school. By the way, one of the students said that the girl started crying for no reason this afternoon. Do you know the reason? Quote. It's probably her illness acting up. Let me tell you, the girl has been acting strangely. She often hugs a water bottle during class and talks to the water inside. Sometimes, she even calls the water glass big sister. The woman seemed to be interested. She can't get along with other students at all. I once asked her to sit with a student in class who was not as sick, but the girl scratched the other student's face just because the other student wanted to look at her water glass. She's that aggressive. When we came in, the doctor didn't say that. Quote. Then who knows? In any case, I've completely given up on her. As long as I can earn money, that's enough. You know about the situation here. There is a target. If 60% of the students show signs of recovery, and the remaining 40% show no signs of worsening, that's enough. The woman hugged the man called Ah Cheng, and her voice was completely different from when she was with the other students. The man did not reject her. He allowed Xiaozhu to hug his arm, and he purposely leaned closer to her. No matter what, we have to find the girl. Otherwise, if the supervisor comes and finds out that you've locked her up in a small room and allowed her to cry, the headmaster will probably punish you. The voice was filled with affection. The man leaned against Xiaozhu, and the two of them entered the corridor. Just as the man was about to turn on the light, Xiaozhu, who was hugging the man's arm, suddenly saw a small shadow reflected on the wall at the end of the corridor. There! She screamed, and then the man turned on the lights in the corridor, and the low shadow on the wall disappeared. What did you see? There's a shadow ahead. It looks like the girl. She hasn't left the school yet. The man held Xiaozhu's hand and ran to the end of the corridor. When they arrived, they realized that there was no shadow on the wall, only a puddle of water. Who would spill water here? Is it that girl? Quote. Other than her, there shouldn't be anyone else. But what is the girl trying to do? Xiaozhu was confused. But then again, the girl seems to like playing with water. Wen woke up from her afternoon nap and started to cry. Then, something must have happened during her afternoon nap. Ah Cheng was calmer. The person responsible for the afternoon patrol today is Mr. Wang. She seems to be searching outside the school with the headmaster. I'll give her a call to ask. The man made the call, and Xiaozhu looked at him with annoyance. How come you have her number? When did you get it? Quote. Mr. Wang, during the afternoon, did you notice anything strange with Wen? No, I saw a strand of hair in her water, so I poured the water out for her. That's all. Yes. Then where did you pour the water from the glass? Did you spill it on the girl's bed? Quote. What do you mean? What does that have to do with me? Mr. Wang replied angrily. I poured the water into the bathroom. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. Quote. The bathroom. Come, let's go take a look. The man did not want to discuss why he had Mr. Wang's number with Xiaozhu, so he changed the topic and led Xiaozhu to the bathroom at the end of the corridor. His hand was on the door handle, but Ah Cheng pulled his hand back instantly. Why is the door handle covered in water? Has someone been in or out? Quote. He looked at the door and noticed that the gap between the door was also soaked with water. It looked like it had gone moldy, and it gave off a faded stench. The girl is hiding in the bathroom. With confusion, the man pushed the door open. The sound of running water came out from inside the room. The faucet was not closed, and someone had used water to write on the mirror of the sink, "I am here." Water slid down the surface of the mirror. The words had been written not long ago. Was this written by Wen Wen? Ah Cheng turned to Xiao Zhu. Normally, Xiao Zhu interacted with Wen Wen the most. Of course not. The girl doesn't even know how to read, so how could she know how to write? Xiao Zhu looked at the words on the mirror, and she was rather afraid. Then, this means that someone else has snuck into our school, and he is probably the one who kidnapped Wen Wen. The man crossed his arms over his chest and fell into deep thought. Xiao Zhu became more and more anxious. The lights in the corridor flickered, and she looked at the faucet, and she suddenly noticed a problem. The stopper on the sink was not plugged, but the water could not flow smoothly. Looking at the rising water, Xiao Zhu felt suffocated again. It was like she was standing in the middle of a pool, watching the water slowly rise over her heart. The girl's singing and mumbling entered her ears. Her body was shaking, and out of the corner of her eyes, she saw something floating out from the drain of the sink. She walked to the sink and slowly placed her hand into it. When she touched the thing and was about to pull it out, she realized that it was a woman's hair. Xiao Zhu struggled like she had grabbed something very disgusting. She wanted to call for the male teacher next to her, but when she turned her head around, she saw a girl standing in the mirror. Her whole body was pale from being soaked in water. She was wearing a bloodied shirt, and her hair was poking out from the bottom of the sink. Her lips moved like she was saying, "Have you found me?" Xiao Zhu's mind was completely muddled, and a familiar chill came from her wrist. She felt like the water had gone past her mouth and nose. Her lungs were filled with water, and she could not breathe. Her arms and legs flailed wildly. She wanted to scream, but there was no reply. She could only see the woman in the mirror slowly raise her head to reveal that indescribable face. Under normal circumstances, the woman in the mirror could be considered a beauty, but the woman's face was swollen. The weirdest thing was, the woman's face kept changing. Her black hair spread out, and after a while, Xiao Zhu felt like she was slowly becoming familiar. She realized with fear that the woman's face in the mirror was starting to resemble her own. She waved her hands, but she could not control her body. The sound of water echoed in her ears. Xiao Zhu felt like she was trapped inside the mirror, and her body had been swapped with the female ghost. "Save me! Save me! Save!" She gasped for air, but there was no oxygen in her lungs. Before she suffocated, Xiao Zhu's face twisted. Out of instinct, she slammed into the glass mirror before her. "Pa!" The sound came, and blood blurred her vision, but the feeling of suffocation disappeared. "Xiao Zhu!" Ah Cheng's call appeared in her ears, and the woman's consciousness finally came back. Her body swayed, and she fell backward. "What's wrong?" The man hugged Xiao Zhu from behind. Blood leaked out from her forehead, dyeing her eyes red. "Mirror, there's someone in the mirror." Xiao Zhu hugged Ah Cheng's arm and screamed as she pointed at the mirror. The mirror in the bathroom cracked from the impact, and pieces of the mirror that were stained with blood fell from the wall. Ah Cheng hugged Xiao Zhu and knocked away the glass shards from the woman's hair. He was also spooked by the woman's earlier action. "Don't be afraid, I'm here, and I'm here." Ah Cheng held the woman and moved backward. He realized that there was something wrong with this bathroom. The black hair at the sink's drain was swaying like seaweed. The water kept rising, and it slowly overflowed from the sink. Drop after drop of water fell to the ground, and the atmosphere in the room became even scarier. The flowing water was like a suicide who had cut his wrist with a knife. It was not water that fell to the ground but blood. "We need to leave this place first." Ah Cheng carried Xiao Zhu and dragged her out of the room. "The water pipe is still open," Xiao Zhu's voice sounded weak. "I don't have time to worry about that. I'll bring more people in later. I'll take you to the hospital first." Ah Cheng didn't think it was scary at first, but when the woman suddenly went crazy, Ah Cheng's heart jumped. He was like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bowstring. When he turned around to look at the bathroom, he suddenly saw the blood on the broken mirror wriggling like worms in the river, slowly forming a few words. "I'm in the mirror. She's in your arms." When he saw those words, Ah Cheng almost let go of the woman's hand. He realized that this was not a prank. Something really strange had happened at the rehabilitation school. Her forehead was still bleeding, and Xiaozhu looked completely different from how cute she used to be. Her wound had not been treated, and she looked quite scary. The lights in the corridor flickered faster. To speed up the child's recovery, the hospital had pasted many cartoons and animal pictures on the walls. At this moment, under the illumination of the lights, the changes in light and darkness caused the figures of the cartoon characters to become strange. The smiling faces were especially frightening. More and more water leaked out from the sink in the bathroom. The water seemed to have a life of its own as it flowed out of the bathroom and followed behind Ah Cheng. Ah Cheng did not notice this. A normal person would not have noticed this. All his attention was focused on the cartoons on the wall. This is the first time I've realized how scary these things are at night. I'll have to tell the headmaster to replace all of them. The words that appeared in the mirror kept appearing in Ah Cheng's mind. He held Xiaozhu, who had her head lowered. He could feel the softness of her body, but he could not feel the warmth of her body. Xiaozhu. He tried to call her name. Xiaozhu raised her head in his arms. The wound opened up, and the blood on her forehead slid down the tip of her nose. It made her look very scary. Ah Cheng, I feel so tired, and my head is so dizzy. The drawn-out tone and heavy nasal voice sounded like the woman's nasal cavity was filled with water. The girlfriend that he once loved deeply now looked like a stranger to him. It was a feeling that was hard to describe. Hold on a little longer. I'll take you to the doctor now. Ah Cheng bit on the tip of his tongue. His girlfriend was in so much pain, and he had the thought of abandoning her. That was not right. He picked up his pace, but as he walked, he realized that the corridor of the rehabilitation school seemed to have lengthened. I've been walking for quite a while already. The bad feeling in his heart grew stronger. He gritted his teeth, hugged Xiaozhu, and started to run. However, he had just taken the first step when he seemed to step on something, and he slid to the ground. Both he and Xiaozhu fell to the ground. When he turned back to look, he realized that the corridor had become wet, and a stream of water was following behind him like a venomous snake. His eyes looked further away, and the door of the cubicle next to the bathroom slowly opened. A small figure appeared behind the door. She was leaning against the door. The light was not that dim, but he could not see her face clearly. He only knew that she was wearing a soaked jacket. When the cubicle that the girl had appeared in was the small room that the woman had locked when in that afternoon. Ah Cheng was about to make his next move when his phone rang. He answered the call almost subconsciously. Has the girl returned to school? The principal and I have asked many merchants outside, and they all said that they have not seen Wen. The girl is probably still at school, but she's hiding somewhere. Quote. The caller was Mr. Wang. Hearing her voice, it was like Ah Cheng was grasping at straws. Wen is at school. Come quickly. Xiaozhu is injured. Quote. Injured. Okay. I'll be there in a minute. The call was hung up in a hurry. Ah Cheng wanted to say more. He put the phone away, but when he moved the screen away, he saw Xiaozhu looking up at him in a very awkward posture. Who are you talking to? Mr. Wang, she'll be here soon. Ah Cheng was a cautious person. When he realized that Xiaozhu's tone was not right, he did not ask any more questions. When he saw the black shadow that looked like Wen, he did not get too close. From how he saw it, it was better to leave this place first. I've already searched that room. The little girl is clearly not there. Could it be that the child is playing hide and seek with us? How could a little girl with a mental defect and an abnormal brain be able to fool the adults around in circles? The more Ah Cheng thought about it, the more afraid he became. A horror movie that he had seen a long time ago flashed through his mind. The main character was a strange person who looked as innocent as a child but had lived for a very long time. Every time she was adopted, the peace of the family would be shattered, and the family would be dyed red with blood. Could this child have the same disease? Not daring to think any further, Ah Cheng dragged Xiaozhu out of the corridor. However, when he reached the door, he realized that the door that led outside had been locked. Where's the key? Ah Cheng searched through his pockets and could not find the key. He used both hands to shake the door until the light above his head went off. The small figure that was hiding inside the room walked out. His hands reached out like he was trying to stop something. Don't come any closer. Seeing the figure run faster and faster down the corridor, Ah Cheng loosened his grip. He planned to abandon Xiaozhu and then jump out the window to escape alone. However, strangely enough, even though he let go, Xiaozhu's body was still stuck to him. The woman's face was pressed tightly against Ah Cheng's chest. She raised her head. "Ah Cheng, don't you want me anymore?" Blood spread on the woman's face, and the sound of water dripping echoed in his ears. For some reason, Ah Cheng felt like the woman's face was becoming more and more unfamiliar, like it was a different woman. Pushing the woman's head to the side, Ah Cheng's breathing quickened, and his heart raced. "Wait here, I'll go out and call for help." The sound of water dripping did not disappear. If anything, it grew louder. The small figure in the corridor was approaching, and the woman on the ground crawled toward him. Her hair stuck to his arm, and eventually, she gripped Ah Cheng's leg tightly. "Don't leave me here alone." Who locked the door? Have the two of them found Wen? A woman who looked rather quiet stopped at the classroom door. She didn't even answer the phone. Could it be that she ran away because she couldn't find her? From her tone, one could hear the woman's dissatisfaction toward the other teachers at the school. She took out the key and opened the door. The ground was covered in water stains. What happened? The woman stopped at the door and turned on the light on her phone. Xiao Cheng said on the phone that Li Shuizhu was injured. They were looking for a child at the school, so how did they injure themselves? Is there a third person here? She reached out to press the light switch, but the light appeared to be broken, and she could not turn it on. She tiptoed forward, and the woman raised her phone. The light shone down the corridor. She saw that the door to the bathroom was open, and a small girl was standing before the mirror. The girl stood on her tiptoes and reached her hand into the sink like she was trying to fish something out. After a while, something that shocked the woman even more happened. The girl also reached her head into the sink and buried her whole face in it. When? The woman thought the girl looked familiar from behind, and she sneaked closer to the bathroom. What is the girl doing? There was a puddle on the ground, and no matter how careful she was, she would still make a sound. When the woman reached the door to the bathroom, she saw a monster with a bloated body standing inside the broken mirror. In the broken mirror stood a bloated monster. She was wearing a blood-stained coat and her hands were pressed against the back of the girl's head. She wants to drown the girl. At the crucial moment, rationality won over fear. The woman rushed into the bathroom to save the girl. Seeing the woman rush in, the monster in the mirror was surprised. At the spot where the woman was standing earlier, black hair spread like seaweed. If the woman had turned to run, she would have run into the web of black hair. Different from what the woman in the mirror expected, the woman rushed to the sink without hesitation. At that moment, she seemed to have forgotten her fear. The long dress fluttered, and it was stained with water. The woman appeared beside the girl in the blink of an eye. Without thinking about anything else, she pulled the girl whose head was pressed into the sink out. "Are you all right?" Water slid down the girl's face. Her face was pale, and her purple lips were pulled to the sides. After being pressed into the water and almost suffocated to death, the girl not only did not cry, she even showed a small smile. This was very strange to the woman. She did not notice that the monster in the mirror was slowly becoming clearer. The blurry face revealed a smile that was similar to the girl's. "I'll get you out of here." Even at that moment, the woman did not forget to protect the girl in her arms. She hurriedly retreated. The water pipe was not closed, and the color of the liquid that leaked out darkened like it was not water but blood that leaked out from the pipe. The sound of water dripping echoed in the narrow bathroom. Something seemed to be crawling on the ground, giving off a rustling sound. The woman did not dare turn back. She carried the girl and ran down the dark corridor. The light from the phone flickered on the wall. She could not see the path under her feet, but she knew that there seemed to be something extra in the smooth corridor, and it was soft to step on. In just a few seconds, the woman walked down the corridor. However, when she stopped at the door, she realized that the door that led to the outside had been locked. There are other people at this school. The woman put the girl down. She turned back to look down the corridor. Water gushed out from the bathroom, and there were blurry things that looked like seaweed floating on the ground. "Have you seen other people here?" The woman shielded the girl with both hands, and her heart ached when she saw the girl's pale face. "There were 2 teachers who came in earlier. You should have seen them, right?" The girl stood quietly before the woman. The whites of her eyes dilated, and her purple lips slowly opened to say 2 words to the woman. Mom, Mom. Mom, you're calling me. The woman's arms around the girl loosened instinctively. She realized that everything and everyone in the room was not normal. You've mistaken me for the wrong person, child. I'm not your mother. The girl did not change her mind. She called for her mother again and then raised her arms to grab the woman's. Wait a minute, you, the fear finally surfaced. The woman stood up and leaned toward the door. But before she could get close, the little girl's expression suddenly turned ferocious. Don't go there. Pa. Before the little girl could finish, the glass not far from the woman exploded. The thick smell of blood wafted into the house. Half of a malevolent and terrifying hammer with spikes was stuck in the window frame. Bang! Under the watchful eyes of the woman and the little girl, the hammer was forcibly pulled out, and then it fell heavily again. This time, it was even more straightforward, and the window frame was directly smashed. How fragile. A backpack was thrown into the house from the window. Then, a young man jumped onto the windowsill. The moonlight shone on his back, obscuring his face. However, one could clearly see the ridiculously large hammer in his hand. Without any words or even eye contact, the woman and the little girl next to her retreated at the same time. The little girl, whose white had already spread, slowly recovered when she saw the young man. A low growl came from inside the bathroom, like the monster inside the room had sensed something that could threaten the little girl's safety. It wanted the child to hurry back and stay away from her. Don't be afraid, I'm here to save you. The young man also heard the growl coming from the corridor. He jumped down from the windowsill and activated the recorder in his backpack. Then, he touched the little girl's head affectionately. Wen, I'm Chen Ge. I'm the haunted house boss who brought you to the theme park yesterday morning. Quote. The woman next to him was completely dumbfounded. She did not understand why a haunted house boss would appear at a place like this at a time like this. This was too much of a shock for her. Take this child out first. Chen Ge pushed the child into the woman's arms and stood in the middle of the corridor. Can I leave now? The woman was still in disbelief. She hugged the little girl and wanted to escape through the window, but to her surprise, the little girl suddenly grabbed Chen Ge's leg and refused to let Chen Ge go. The girl's face looked much better, but her expression was one of panic. Her lips quivered, and she stammered, big sister. I know, I won't hurt her. I just feel like she deserves a better life. Chen Ge lightly pulled the girl's hand away. Take her out. That day, Chen Ge would not let Wen's sister go no matter what. Based on all the information that he had gathered, he could confirm that Wen's sister was probably the strongest presence inside the twin water ghost scenario. If she was inside the dam, and he did not summon Zhongya, he would not be able to enter the dam to deal with her. After all, no one knew how many water ghosts were hiding inside eastern Zhujiang Dam. The mission hasn't even started, but I've already tied up the leader. This kind of mission experience is not bad at all. Holding the hammer with both hands, Chen Ge stood between Wen and the bathroom. The ghost inside the bathroom saw the girl being taken away, and she hissed again. Countless strands of black hair mixed in the water and surged toward Chen Ge. We both use hair as weapons, but your hair is so much weaker than the one in my shadow. The hair that was mixed in the water could not get close to Chen Ge before it was stepped on. Xu Yin seemed to see something hiding inside the room at the end of the corridor. He leaned his head to the side and asked the half-open door, does it hurt? Without needing Chen Ge to say anything, the black hair on the ground was cut off by the blood vessels. Other than where his heart was, Xu Yin, whose shirt was dyed red, shot out like an arrow. The black hair crawled out from the water and curled around Xu Yin's body, but it could not stop him. It could only temporarily slow him down. Stop struggling. For the sake of your sister, I won't make things difficult for you. Chen Ge flipped through the comic and released by Cholan. The man and the ghost charged forward, one on the left and one on the right. The monster inside the bathroom was already having a hard time dealing with Xu Yin alone. When she saw Bai Chulin's chest that was dyed red, she gave up resisting. The black hair retracted on its own, and it wanted to retreat into the bathroom. Chen Ge chased after it. When he entered the bathroom, the water pipe had already closed on its own, and no more water flowed out. Do you think you'll let a water ghost escape? Using yin-yang vision and ghost ear at the same time, the sound of thumping echoed in Chen Ge's ears. The ghost was still hiding inside the pipe, but she was running down the pipe. It's here. Staring at the pipe, Chen Ge raised the hammer and swung it at a spot above his head. Bang! The pipe burst, and water splashed everywhere, drenching his clothes. Narrowing his eyes, Chen Ge looked at the black hair that was escaping through the pipe, and his eyes narrowed. I won't let you go no matter what. He put away Shu Yin and Bai Cholan and ran out of the school. Where's the main water and electricity switch? Chen Ge jumped over the window. Holding the hammer, he placed one hand on the woman's shoulder. The woman that he had saved earlier was hugging the girl in the middle of the field, preparing to leave. She did not expect Chen Ge to come out so soon. She was flustered, and she did not know what to say. I'm asking you, where's the main switch? No, we're on the same route as the residential area next to us. The main gate is on their side. The woman's words were intermittent, but Chen Ge understood her. The residential area next to them used the same route as the school. As long as they could shut off the main gate, they would be able to trap the water ghost inside the pipe between the residential area and the school. Of course, Chen Ge did not have 100% guarantee that it would work. The water ghost could enter any house through the pipe at any time, and that was the thing that worried Chen Ge the most. Go and inform the management to temporarily shut off the main switch. Tell them that the person who kidnapped the girl and harmed the teachers and students is hiding inside the pipe. After giving that order, Chen Ge placed the hammer back into his backpack. He focused and cleared away all distracting thoughts as he listened to the strange sound coming from inside the pipe. The sound moved further and further away from him. Zhujiang's water network was very complicated. If he could not stop the monster in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. The culprit is hiding inside the pipe. How did he get in? The woman stood where she was. Why would anyone believe a reason like that? She wanted to explain it to Chen Ge, but Chen Ge had already rushed out of the school. The pipe was buried underground, so it could not be seen directly. Chen Ge could only rely on his ghost ear to listen to the sound of the monster moving. Sometimes, he even wanted to close his eyes and get rid of all external influences. About 2 minutes later, Chen Ge followed the sound into a small area behind the rehabilitation school. As soon as he entered the neighborhood, Chen Ge shivered. The temperature in the neighborhood was much lower than outside. It was just a door away, but the difference in temperature was huge. Strange, why do I feel like I'm back at the underground morgue? Chen Ge's body temperature was lower than a normal person's. Even he felt the chill, which meant that there was a problem. The residential area in front of them was built in an area that was not considered prosperous in eastern Zhejiang. Unlike other residential areas, there was no iron fence around the residential area. Instead, it was surrounded by high walls like a prison. It was not aesthetically pleasing, and it looked very awkward. There were a total of 7 buildings in the neighborhood, and they were all around 10 stories tall. They looked like they had been built for a long time, but perhaps because of the lack of maintenance, they gave off a shabby feeling. It was very normal in eastern Zhejiang, and there was nothing special about it. However, after entering it, Chen Ge had a strange feeling in his heart. It felt like someone was watching him from behind one of the windows, and that kind of gaze caused cold sweat to break out on Chen Ge's back. Wen's sister probably didn't choose this place randomly. Chen Ge did not back down. From how he saw it, unless there was a red specter hiding in this residential area, no ghost would be able to stop him. The buildings around the residential area still had some lights on, but this residential area was dark, and the deeper he went, the darker it became. Chen Ge listened to the sound coming from the pipe under his feet and followed the monster to a building at the deepest part of the residential area. Even though he had completed so many trial missions, Chen Ge still hesitated before entering this building. The building before him had been burned down. Even though the walls had been repainted, when he got closer, he could still smell the faded stench like something had been burnt. Not only that, from many details, it could be seen that this was a building that had experienced a serious fire, but the building had not been abandoned. After the renovation, someone had moved in. A building that has been burned down. Chen Ge was reminded of another trial mission that he had seen on the black phone, the 3-star difficulty, ghost fire burning building. It shouldn't be that coincidental. There are many buildings that have been burned down. He took out the hammer from his backpack. The sound coming from the water ghost had weakened. She followed the water pipe and ran into the residential building before him. Why did she have to run into this building? The main valve is probably still open, so she had the chance to escape into the other pipes. Why did she choose this path of death? Quote, if this water ghost was really Wenwen's sister, and her life had been taken away by her biological parents, then she must have been very resentful after her death. A ghost like that would be very vengeful. I've ruined her plan, so she must be angry. She probably lured me into this building because there's an even scarier presence here, and she wants to borrow a knife to kill me. Chen Ge soon understood the water ghost's intention, but he was not afraid. If you want to borrow a knife to kill me, then I'll take the knife that you borrowed with me today. Entering the building, he saw that someone had splashed paint on the walls, and there were many words like, "Give me back my child's life." Walking down the stairs, it sounded like something was crawling inside the pipes, and the sound kept coming from them. Chen Ge summoned Chu Yin and Bai Cholan to chase after him. The sound finally stopped on the 13th floor. She wants to lure me here. Chen Ge was afraid of all the floors that included the 3rd floor. He looked at the few rooms on the 13th floor, but he could not tell where Wenwen's sister was hiding. Should I try them one by one? It'll be embarrassing to disturb others. Quote. Holding the hammer in one hand, Chen Ge's eyes moved between the 3 doors. The dark sky was filled with blood vessels, and many eyes with hatred and vengeance stared at the corner of the street. In this blood-red city stood a man wearing a blood-red doctor's uniform. He held his lover's head with one hand, and with every step he took, blood would slide down his shirt. It was an extreme shade of red. Kindness corresponds to evil, and sin corresponds to punishment. Everything in the world has its opposite. The man silently raised the head in his palm. Then what is the opposite of human beings? Shadows flashed through the blood-dyed street, but the man seemed to have gotten used to this. He looked at the burned building at the end of the street, and his face was filled with madness. Is it hiding there? After eating more, I should be able to find out what is the opposite of human beings. Blood flowed quietly under his feet, and the man's expression became more and more twisted. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry, I want to eat him, eat all of them. I want them to become the food in my stomach, I want them to become my nourishment. Quote. The man looked at the sky, at the scarlet eyes hiding in the shadows. You're looking at me too, aren't you? Stop hiding, I've already seen you. You're around me, you're looking at my body, you want to eat me. You want to eat me too. But why don't you follow your instincts? What are you afraid of? Come out, come out. All of you, come out. Quote. The voice grew louder and louder, the whole street was filled with the man's roar. He was not afraid of anything, he did not seem to have the emotion of fear at all. The red street, blood, dripped onto the ground. In the alley with piles of rotten flesh and moss, in the sewer with red eyes, and in the shadows in the corners where no light could reach. Strange and horrifying things walked out one after another. They could no longer be described as simply horrifying or horrifying. It was not blood, it was not an aura that could be obtained by simply killing many people or slaughtering many things. They were not humans, they could not have been transformed from humans, they should be living behind the door. They were the life on the other side of the door, they were monsters that lived in nightmares, nibbled away at negative energy, and fed on the negative emotions of the living. They did not have a fixed shape. They were different from humans. Their bodies and limbs, they were all twisted into impossible angles. If they had to be described, they were like the scene of a car accident, a dead body that was crushed under the car and dragged dozens of meters away. They could not be called humans, or rather, humans. They had just nibbled away at the negative emotions left behind by too many living people, causing them to take human form. They had the same thoughts as humans, and they had fallen in love with the delicious food of humans. Are you waiting for me? Did you plan this from the start? Put me on the dining table tonight. Let me be your main dish. I saw the knives and forks that you prepared. I saw your greedy eyes. I saw the way you swallowed your saliva, and I saw your Adam's apple trembling with excitement. Quote. The man shouted like a madman, he did not dodge, he just stood there, waiting for something to surround him. Do you think I'll be afraid? The man gently hugged his lover's body, his expression intoxicated. I like this feeling. I am infatuated with death. I adore madness. Between hysterics, I cry and roar. He could shout out all the things that he didn't dare to say when he was born as a human. Here, I can do anything I like. There was no need to conceal or hide anymore. I can make toys out of the limbs of living people. I can open my own skull and look at my own soul. Then, I'll use my past self as a gift to my present self. Quote. A lot of people think I'm crazy, but what does that have to do with them? I used to be a doctor, but what's the use of a doctor who can't even cure himself? The man slowly lowered the head in his hands. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked at the approaching monster, and the smile on his face could no longer be suppressed. The corners of his lips cracked, and the flesh was torn apart, revealing a horrifying smile. Right now, I can be considered a gourmet. My greatest hobby is to eat, to taste everything I see, to stuff all the delicacies into my stomach. Quote. A bone-chilling laugh came from the man's mouth. He was surrounded by all the monsters, but he did not panic at all. It was as if he was not the one being surrounded but the monsters. It's my favorite time to eat again. With my current appearance, is it more appropriate to eat or eat? Never mind, it's all the same. Both of them will end up becoming a part of my body. Quote. The man's tone was crazy, but he had the right to say that because his power had reached a scary level. While he was talking to himself, the blood-red doctor's uniform that he was wearing continued to leak blood. Thick chains formed from countless blood vessels extended from his back, turning him into a monster with countless giant tails. The blood coagulated, and his current appearance was about 30 to 40% similar to the giant ghost that he had carved on the door of Chen Ge's haunted house. Everything in the world has a natural counter to each other, but humans are strange. I have never been able to guess what is the opposite of humans. I used to think that the opposite of humans was the ghost, but it was only after I became a ghost that I realized. The opposite of humans is not the ghost, but the god. Quote. The thick chains swept across the entire street. The blood vessels were densely packed, and when they touched the ghosts, they split and exploded. Like venomous snakes with their own thoughts, they burrowed into their bodies, took root in their hearts, and madly absorbed the nutrients in their bodies. Screams and wails echoed from all directions on the street. The monsters' bodies withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Listening to the wails in his ears, the man laughed loudly. As he laughed, the corners of his lips cracked to his ears. He laughed and laughed. Tears actually flowed out. But he did not seem to notice it at all. He laughed madly, as if all the pain, all the irreversible things could be vented through this laugh. Not enough, far from enough. I'm not full yet. I'm so hungry, I want to eat all of them, I want to eat all of them who want to eat me. Quote. Hysterical laughter came out of his cracked mouth again. Blood flowed from his wounds. No one knew what he had encountered here. No one knew why he had become like this. But one thing was for sure, he was still alive. He was alive in a way that no one could understand, one that was filled with destruction. Blood dyed his teeth red, and he dragged countless monsters behind him. The chains pierced through the monsters' bodies. He dragged the monsters and ran towards the end of the street. At the corner of the street, there was a charred building. The building was more than 10 stories high. Looking through the broken window, one of the rooms in the building had a door that was not blood red. Half of the door was blood red, and the other half was normal brown. After all, in this blood-red city, other than the black that represented destruction, the red that represented blood, and the gray that represented despair, there were very few other colors. Just behind that door, I smell a familiar scent. It smells so good. I want to eat him. I want to crush his head bit by bit, chew on his bones, taste the real delicacy. Quote. The man dragged the shadows and stopped next to the charred building. He lifted his head to look. At the top floor of the building stood a man completely wrapped in a red shirt. The man looked down and was also studying the man in the doctor's uniform. Red clothes, is he the owner of this building? In the blood-red city, the buildings were the most dangerous, because no one knew what was hidden in them. Every building was unknown, and the man in the red doctor's uniform was very powerful. However, as powerful as he was, he still did not dare step into the buildings. The ultimate red was only a red specter. The man knew very well that somewhere in this city, there had to be a presence stronger than a red specter. He did not know how to describe them. He had not seen them before, but he had felt a presence from afar. He could not resist it. Every blood vessel in his body felt like it was about to explode. All his hair stood on end. At that moment, he even forgot that he had turned into a demon. Before those existences, human, specter, and red specter did not seem to make much of a difference. Go back, this is not a place you should be. The man in the red shirt on the building moved his lips, and his voice echoed in the doctor's ears. Behind him, countless chains dragged countless monsters out of the shadows. The doctor did not care about the man's words. He stared at the building silently. He was not afraid of the man in the red shirt on the roof but the unknown that might exist inside the building. In this city, every building was an enclosed world, a solitary nightmare. Entering was easy, but coming out was much more difficult. Don't enter any building, but I am so hungry. I smelled that familiar fragrance, and I felt my soul shiver. I should know the owner of this scent. Perhaps after eating him, I will be able to remember why I have become like this. Quote. The mad tone slowly calmed down. The doctor widened his red eyes to look at the man on the roof. Without any warning, more chains appeared behind him. The chains made up of countless tiny blood vessels stabbed into the building. The doctor climbed madly, and his goal was clear. He wanted to enter the 13th floor, open that special door, and then consume the person who gave off the familiar scent on the other side of the door. This burnt building was the territory of the man in the red shirt on the roof. The strange door on the 13th floor should be related to him as well, and he was probably the one who pushed it open. The red specter was most likely a door pusher, and the door pusher would be able to unleash double his power when he was inside the nightmare. Therefore, when he saw the red specter charge at him, he did not run away immediately. The world behind the door was based on the door pusher's memory. Giving up the nightmare meant betraying one's past and giving one's memory to a stranger. Unless it was the most critical moment, no door pusher would abandon the world behind their door and escape alone. The doctor headed straight for the door on the 13th floor. The man in the red shirt naturally would not let the doctor succeed. He stood at the edge of the building, opened his arms, and leapt forward. His body flew toward the doctor like a cannonball. As he fell, the edges of his blood-red clothes became extremely sharp. The barbs looked like sharp knives, but also like feathers. Underneath the red robe, one could vaguely see horrifying scars. The man's entire body had been severely burned. Just from the scars on his body, one could imagine how much pain he must have been in before he died. The resentment around the man in the red shirt was very strong. His eyes were venomous and filled with destruction. He was similar to the red specter doctor downstairs. Perhaps because they had stayed in this red city for too long, they were slowly being assimilated by the red city. They lost themselves and became crazy and uncontrollable. The man in the red shirt rammed into the doctor from top to bottom. The corner of the doctor's lips cracked from ear to ear. The doctor seemed to have predicted this. He looked at the man in red who was getting closer and closer. Not only did he not panic, he even flashed a horrifying smile at the man in red. Are you that desperate to be eaten by me? Are you that desperate to become a part of my body? Fine, I'll fulfill your wish. Quote. The doctor's uniform was blown away, revealing the densely packed red chains underneath. This terrifying man had actually been concealing his strength all along. 50% of his power had been used to fight against himself. This was a complete madman. Blood vessels continued to seep out of his body. They were like venomous snakes that could never be satiated. They wriggled left and right like they wanted to eat the doctor as well. The man in the red shirt landed from above. The doctor laughed hysterically. He completely let go of the restraints on his body. Countless red chains surged out from his back. There were so many that he could not even count them. From afar, it looked like a giant red man-eating tree was growing at the edge of the building. Its roots were spreading madly like they were trying to swallow the whole building. The fight that he expected did not happen. The man in the red shirt was soon entangled by the many chains and then he was forcefully dragged onto the doctor's back. Back to back, the doctor could clearly hear the man's screams and wails. Under the corrosion of the chains, the man's body was slowly dissolving. Like nutrients, they melted into the doctor's body. Throughout the whole process, the man in the red shirt kept struggling, but his body was stuck to the doctor's back. When the man's wailing slowly weakened, the doctor bit his finger, dipped it in the blood, and made a small cut on his arm. The fourth one, soon. I can already feel something coming out from my body. That should be the new me, but before that, I still wish to find the past that I have forgotten." Quote. The doctor held the head in his arms lightly. "Why do I cry every time I look at her? Why do I have such emotions? How did she die? Who killed her? Who is it that hid her body and only left her head beside me? What should I do? Should I take revenge, or should I help her welcome a new life?" Quote. The doctor stopped at the 13th floor, and his eyes fell on the special door. His cracked lips returned to normal. He pulled back all the chains and stood outside the door. A familiar scent. "The person I'm looking for is on the other side of the door." The man waved his arms, and the chains stabbed into the door. He wanted to open the door, but that seemed to have angered the whole building. Blood that reeked of foul odor leaked out from every corner of the building. At the same time, the blood stain on the door was spreading rapidly. In a few seconds, this special door would be dyed red. Standing on the 13th floor of the apartment building, Chen Ge held the hammer and looked at the 3 doors before him. The sound disappeared on this floor, so the water ghost should be hiding inside one of the houses. Should I break them down to take a look? Before he could decide what to do, the door on the far left suddenly started to bleed. The normal door was slowly dyed red. A door. Chen Ge, who had followed the water ghost, did not expect to see a door inside the building. The door was dyed red, and the blood vessels that extended around it felt familiar to Chen Ge. It's not midnight yet. Even if someone pushed open a door here, it shouldn't have appeared now, right? Is this a trap specifically targeted at me? Is this a trap set up by the mastermind in Eastern Zhejiang? Quote. Chen Ge was no longer the simple toy designer that he used to be. Ever since he obtained the black phone, he would use a different way of thinking when he encountered problems. Unable to make up his mind, Chen Ge did not dare get close to the door. Wen's sister was just a monster from a 2-star trial mission. She was nothing compared to the mastermind in Eastern Zhejiang. Summoning Xu Yin and Bai Cholan, having more ghosts around would give Chen Ge a sense of security. Just as he was hesitating, the blood door started to shake. The blood vessels on the surface of the door started to bulge outward like something was trying to crawl out. There's something behind the door. It wants to force its way out. Quote. This was the first time that Chen Ge had encountered something like this, and he did not know what to do. The bulge on the door became more obvious, and the blood vessels on the door started to move. They tangled together on the door like they were alive, and they morphed into thin chains. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that the chains were carved with pained human faces, and each blood vessel represented a painful and despairing memory. How come this thing looks so familiar? Chen Ge was reminded of his final battle with Dr. Gao at the underground morgue. The blood vessels controlled by the chairman of the Society of Strange Tales were similar to the blood vessels on the door. They were not just blood red, they were carved with human faces, and when one got close, one could hear the wails of living people. It was not midnight, and there was an invisible force in the real world that was fighting against the blood vessels on the door. It was not easy to force the door open at a time like this. The blood vessels were constantly being depleted, but the monster behind the door seemed to have gone mad. It did not care about the price it had to pay. The moment one blood vessel disappeared, another 10 blood vessels would crawl out from behind the door. They entangled together, forming a chain that extended toward the other parts of the corridor. It seemed like it was trying to pull the door open from the outside. The guy inside the door could have waited until midnight to come out. Did he sense something and become so agitated? The smell of burning permeated the building, and there was nothing unusual about it. The only difference from before is that I stopped at the door after entering the stairwell. Is it because the monster sensed my presence? Is it because of the title, Spectre's Favored? Quote. Chen Ge narrowed his eyes. He did not think this was a conspiracy of the culprit in Eastern Zhejiang. Even the water ghost himself did not know that he would appear that night. This was a random occurrence. A burnt building, a blood door. This building fits the description of the trial mission given by the black phone. Based on what Dr. Chen said, my parents came here before they disappeared. Could it be that they had left a deep scar on the specter behind the door, and now the specter has sensed the same bloodline, so it has gone berserk? But that doesn't explain why the blood vessels on the door are the same as those from the Society of Strange Tales. Questions appeared in his mind, and Chen Ge gripped the hammer tightly. He was a brave man, and he slowly approached the door. When he got close, the monster behind the door went berserk. Multiple chains pierced through the blood door, and the closed door was pushed open from the inside. Ah! Chen Ge heard a hysterical roar, and the thick scent of blood almost caused his sense of smell to go haywire. Forcing his eyes open, Chen Ge looked through the gap in the door. His pupils instantly narrowed, and his heart skipped a beat. It's him. A face squeezed through the gap, and Chen Ge could not see it clearly. However, the pair of eyes that stood out from the rest gave Chen Ge a sense of familiarity. Fingers tried to reach through the gap. The monster also saw Chen Ge, and the person before him gave him a strong sense of stimulation. He roared like a beast, and it seemed like he wanted to chew Chen Ge into pieces and swallow him whole. 10 fingers reached through the blood door, and the gap widened. The pressure from the real world also increased. The blood vessels on the door would disappear once they appeared, but the monster behind the door did not care. At that moment, the only thing in his eyes was Chen Ge. Forcefully opening the door, the monster behind the door was under a lot of pressure, but even so, he had to kill Chen Ge. His hands completely reached out from the door. His fingers were long and beautiful. If one only looked at his hands, one might mistake him for a pianist, but in reality, each of his fingers was stained with blood. It was hard to tell how much flesh had been torn from his hands. At least a top red specter. Perhaps he's as powerful as Zhang Ya. Chen Ge soon deduced the monster's power level, and he made the wisest decision: retreat. However, just as he prepared to turn around, he felt a bone-chilling coldness around his waist. Then his legs started to go numb. His body felt like it had been tossed into an ice cave, and he slowly lost control of his body. What's going on? Shu Yin is right beside me. Who can attack me from this distance? Quote. His eyes turned, and Chen Ge saw strands of black hair falling on his shoulders. Someone was standing behind him, leaning against him. Different from the burning red inside the door, the corridor appeared to be sealed in ice. It was so cold that one's heart was about to freeze. The black hair silently reached out from Chen Ge's shadow. It avoided Chen Ge and pulled out all the chains around the door. After losing the large amount of blood vessels, the monster behind the door could no longer fight against the invisible force in real life. The blood vessels on the door started to decrease, but he was still unwilling to give up. The thing that he wanted was so close to him. He tried his best to reach his fingers out. The surrounding black hair seemed to have been waiting for this chance. After removing the chains around the door, it started to gather its power. When the monster behind the door could no longer maintain the gap, all the black hair slammed into the door. The blood door closed instantly, and the monster's 4 fingers were clamped off. After they fell to the ground, they turned into drops of bright red blood. Angry roars kept coming from behind the door. The black hair detached from Chen Ge's body and swept away all the blood droplets. The blood door started to fade, and the voice behind the door started to fade. At that moment, Chen Ge did something that no one expected. He rushed to the door and landed a heavy punch on it. Then he yelled into the door, "I'll be waiting for you in eastern Zhujiang's Liwan City." The monster behind the door heard his voice and seemed to remember something. It uttered a name as a reply. The last drop of blood disappeared from the door. Chen Ge did not hear what the monster said. The gaze is similar to Dr. Gao, and the voice is similar as well, but the Dr. Gao in my memory is completely different from the monster behind the door. The temperature in the building returned to normal like nothing had happened. The scenario behind the door is weaved from the door pusher's memory, so it can be understood as a nightmare that the door pusher can never escape from. In the underground morgue mission, Dr. Gao shouldered all the despair and negative emotions alone, and it caused the underground morgue to collapse. After the scenario collapsed, I saw the world outside the scenario. It was a blood-red city. If a single building is the nightmare of a person in despair, then the entire blood-red city is very likely to be an amalgamation of countless nightmares piled together. Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. Multiple nightmares are mixed together and slowly ferment. What kind of monster will be born from the deep ocean of negative emotions? Chen Ge stood in the corridor. He had never been so clear-headed before. In a 1-star trial mission, my main opponent is a living person. In a 2-star trial mission, the strongest combatant is a half-red specter, like the middle-aged woman who kidnapped the child on the hearse and Wen's sister from the water ghost mission. 3-star trial missions are a threshold. Every 3-star mission has one or more red specters, and most importantly, all the 3-star missions contain a door. Be it the third sick hall, coffin village, or the underground morgue. The existence of a door is the symbol of a 3-star trial mission. If that's the case, then what is a 4-star trial mission that is more difficult than a 3-star trial mission? There are multiple doors in the same scenario. Or is the space behind the door not enclosed but a relatively open cluster of buildings? Quote. Chen Ge thought the second possibility was more likely. The difficulty of Liwan City's trial mission is 3.5 star. If the scenario behind the door in Liwan City is similar to the one in Xiao Bu's game, then it can indirectly prove my speculation. After the door goes out of control, the scenario behind the door will no longer be limited to one building but will expand. If left unchecked, it will eventually become a 4-star scenario. Quote. The culprit had used the hearse on Route 104 to send negative emotions into Liwan City and then used the despairing passengers as seeds to sow the seeds. Chen Ge still remembered the conversation he had with the passengers on the hearse. There was a ghost apartment in Liwan City, and to fulfill a wish, one had to give or bear something. The culprit in eastern Zhejiang should have used these people's obsession to turn them into carriers of fear and misfortune, to create more despair and attract more passengers. The main reason he did this was probably to turn Liwan City into a 4-star scenario. Using those who are already in despair as chess pieces, this monster in eastern Zhejiang is even more despicable than the Society of Strange Tales. Chen Ge was very calm. There is already a 4-star trial mission in eastern Zhejiang, Ghost Fetus. Could it be that the thing that is pulling the strings is from this scenario? The more Chen Ge thought about it, the more likely it seemed. The culprit in eastern Zhejiang always appeared in the form of a shadow, and the scarier thing was that just a shadow could fight with Zhangya. A 3-star scenario shouldn't have this kind of monster. Zhangya should represent the peak of a 3-star scenario, so the monster has to be related to a 4-star scenario. His main body is probably trapped somewhere, or his main body can't leave easily, so he can only use this method to stir up trouble in eastern Zhejiang. Standing in the stairwell, Chen Ge was deep in thought when the door of the rightmost home on the 13th floor suddenly opened, and a fat middle-aged man stood at the door, holding his phone. What are you screaming about? After a short conversation, the middle-aged man and Chen Ge's eyes met. Chen Ge saw that the pipe in the middle-aged man's home was not closed, and strands of black hair were flowing against the current. The middle-aged man's eyes fell on Chen Ge's hand, attracted by the scary-looking hammer in Chen Ge's palm. It was hard to imagine that something so barbaric and bloody could be found in a modern city. Blood grooves, barbs, and a handle that looked like a spine. Every detail of this hammer seemed to be telling others that it was fundamentally different from the hammers used at construction sites. You, get out of the way. Chen Ge was polite to the middle-aged man. Not harming the innocent was his style. Dragging the hammer with one hand, Chen Ge rammed into the room and aimed at the pipe that was supplying water to the bathroom. Bang! A loud explosion came from inside the room. The pipe burst, and the water splashed several meters away, landing directly on the middle-aged man's face. He was scared out of his wits, and his mouth hung open for a long time. Xu Yin. After his first encounter with the water ghost, Chen Ge had learned his lesson. He predicted the water ghost's location and smashed the pipe before the water ghost. Kicking the bathroom door shut, Chen Ge summoned Bai Cholan and Xu Yin at the same time and had them block the two ends of the pipe. Where do you think you're going? Wet black hair crawled out from the pipe and covered the whole bathroom. The water ghost was making its last struggle. The mirror shattered, the pipe snapped, and the sound of struggle came out from the narrow bathroom. What is he doing inside? The middle-aged man looked at the water that leaked out from under the bathroom door. After a long time, he finally reacted and called the police. Hey, is it the police? A madman just barged into my home, come quickly. Quote. Is he aggressive? Yes. He's very dangerous. He's holding an elder's hammer. Quote. I don't know him. Once he barged in, he smashed the pipe. I swear, I didn't say anything. I just exchanged a look with him. Quote. Okay, I understand. I won't provoke him anymore. I'll leave first, come quickly. Quote. Half an hour later, Chen Ge finally had the water ghost under control. The narrow space was not conducive to his full potential. He and Bai Cholan guarded the water pipe and the underground pipe, and the main force was still Xu Yin. If he's so hard to deal with on the ground, it's hard to tell what will happen if he really runs into him inside the dam. After the battle with the water ghost, Chen Ge noticed a problem. The water ghost's attack style would become extremely strange when it was surrounded by water, and its combat power would double. Thankfully, I caught him on land, or else this mission would be no less difficult than a normal 3-star trial mission. Chen Ge shoved the wriggling black hair in Xu Yin's hand into a shampoo bottle. Behind the black hair, there was the shadow of a girl. She was wearing a bloodied shirt, and she looked similar to Wen Wen, but she was slightly older than Wen Wen. She's just a child. She won't be able to survive without a parent at this age. After shoving the hair into the shampoo bottle, Chen Ge placed it inside his backpack and placed it next to the recorder. The 2-star trial mission hasn't started yet, but I've already captured the boss alive. After the water ghost joins the haunted house family, I'll go to the dam to see if I can recruit her subordinates. Quote. Satisfied, Chen Ge shoved the hammer back into his backpack and opened the bathroom door. Don't move. Stay where you are. Don't move. A shout came from the door. Chen Ge was given a fright, but his expression soon turned strange because the voice sounded familiar. Raising his hands, Chen Ge slowly walked out from the bathroom. When they saw his face, the 2 officers were also shocked. Officer Xiao Qing, I told you 2 days ago at the fishing enthusiast's yard that we would meet again. Chen Ge smiled shyly. I didn't lie to you, did I?